Welcome to Learning English from People.
A hero or a monster? Margaret Thatcher. Some people say she saved her country. Others say she hurt it deeply. For many, she was a hero. For many others, she was an enemy. This is the story of a woman who divided a nation. Her name was Margaret Thatcher, and they called her the Iron Lady. For 11 years, from 1979 to 1990, she was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She was the first woman to lead the country, and she changed it forever. Her story did not begin in a rich or powerful family. It began in a small town called Grantham. Margaret was born there in 1925. Her family owned a grocery shop, and they lived in a small home above it. Life was simple and disciplined. Her father, Alfred, was the most important person in her early life. He was a local politician and also a preacher in their church. He taught Margaret two big ideas. First, always work hard. Second, always be responsible for yourself. These lessons shaped her whole life. Margaret was a very smart and serious child. She loved to learn and ask questions. Her family was Methodist, a type of Christian faith. This taught her that there was a clear right and a clear wrong in the world. She carried this strong sense of certainty with her always. Even as a girl, she was very logical. A friend once said Margaret did not believe in angels. She had calculated that their wings were not big enough to fly. She was an excellent student. She won a special place at a good school, and later she went to the famous Oxford University. This was a very big step for a grocer's daughter. At Oxford, she studied chemistry. One of her teachers, Dorothy Hodgkin, later won a Nobel Prize, but Margaret found her true passion outside the science lab. She became very interested in politics. In 1946, she became the president of the student conservative group at Oxford. Here, she read a book that changed her thinking. It said that when governments control the economy too much, people lose their freedom. This became her core belief. After university, Margaret worked as a chemist. First, she helped develop new plastics. Later, she worked for a food company, helping to make better ice cream. But her mind was always on politics. She wanted to be a leader. At a political dinner, she met a kind businessman named Dennis Thatcher. He was 10 years older than her. He became her biggest supporter. He was the quiet, strong person behind her amazing career. In the 1950s, Margaret tried to become a member of Parliament. She was young and female, which was very unusual at the time. She did not win her first elections, but people noticed her. They saw she was smart, brave, and worked very hard. She and Dennis got married in 1951. With his help, she studied to become a lawyer. She specialized in tax law, a very difficult subject. In 1953, she had 2 children, twins named Carol and Mark. Being a mother did not stop her. She still wanted a career in politics. After a few years with her young family, she tried again. In 1959, she finally won an election. Margaret Thatcher became the Member of Parliament for a place called Finchley in London. Her journey to the top had begun. Her career moved forward quickly. She was known for her hard work and attention to detail. In 1970, the Conservative Party won the national election. The new Prime Minister, Edward Heath, gave her an important job. She became the Secretary of State for Education and Science. This job would make her famous, but not in a good way. It was a difficult test that made her stronger. Her time as Education Secretary was a battle. The government needed to save money. One of their cuts was to stop giving free milk to school children between 7 and 11 years old. Margaret had to announce this decision. The public was furious. Newspapers gave her a terrible nickname, Margaret Thatcher, Milk Snatcher. She became one of the most hated politicians in Britain. She later said she learned an important lesson. She got the maximum amount of hate for a minimum amount of savings. But the attacks did not break her. They made her tougher. The government of Edward Heath soon had bigger problems. The country's economy was in crisis. Prices were rising, and powerful groups called trade unions were going on strike. The miners' union was especially strong. They stopped working, and the country had no coal for electricity. Britain was dark and cold. In 1974, the Conservative Party lost 2 elections. The country was in a deep mess. Margaret Thatcher saw her chance. She believed the party's leaders were too weak. They were not ready to make the hard decisions needed to save Britain. She was an outsider, a woman in a party run by powerful men. But she was not afraid. In 1975, she challenged Edward Heath for the leadership of the party. To everyone's surprise, she won. Margaret Thatcher was now the leader of the opposition. A woman was leading a major British political party for the first time in history. She spent the next few years preparing herself and her party. She worked with experts to soften her public image and even trained her voice to sound lower and calmer. More importantly, she gathered a team of thinkers who shared her belief in free markets and less government control. She promised a complete change from the old way of doing things. In a famous speech, she spoke strongly against the Soviet Union. A Russian newspaper gave her a new name. They called her the Iron Lady. She loved it. It was the perfect name for the strong, unbending leader she wanted to be. Her moment came in the winter of 1978. It was called the Winter of Discontent. Many workers went on strike. Garbage was not collected in the streets. Hospitals were only open for emergencies. The country felt broken. The Labour government seemed to have no answers. In the 1979 election, Margaret Thatcher offered a clear, strong message of change. The people listened. The Conservatives won a big victory. On May 4, 1979, she walked into 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister. Her time as Prime Minister was a revolution. Her ideas were called Thatcherism. They were radical and new. She wanted to change Britain in a big way. Her government focused on one main problem: inflation. Prices were rising too fast. To stop this, they raised interest rates. This made it expensive for people and businesses to borrow money. The economy slowed down. It was a difficult medicine for the country. The first years were very hard. Many factories closed. By 1982, more than 3 million people were unemployed. This was a terrible number. There were riots in big cities like London and Liverpool. Many people, even in her own party, begged her to change her plan. They wanted a U-turn. At her party's conference in 1980, she gave a famous answer. She said, "You turn if you want to. The lady's not for turning." She would not give up. Her popularity was at an all-time low. It seemed her time as leader might be short. Then, a crisis happened on the other side of the world. In April 1982, Argentine forces took control of the Falkland Islands, known as the Malvinas in Argentina. Both Britain and Argentina claimed that these islands belonged to them. Thatcher decided to respond with force. She sent a large group of ships and soldiers to the area. It was a huge political and military risk. For 74 days, the two countries were at war. It was a difficult conflict. A very serious moment was the sinking of an Argentine ship, the General Belgrano. Over 300 sailors died. This action was controversial. Some supported it, while others criticized it heavily. In June, the British military won the final battle. The islands returned to British control, and the war ended. The victory changed everything. People called it the Falklands factor. The country felt proud again. Margaret Thatcher was seen as a strong, decisive war leader. Her popularity went up very high. With the economy also starting to improve, she called an election in 1983. She won by a landslide. It was one of the biggest election victories in British history. With this huge new power, she started her next big battle. This fight was not against a foreign country. It was against the trade unions at home. She believed the unions had too much power. She said they stopped businesses from growing and held the country back. The biggest fight was with the coal miners. In 1984, the government announced a plan to close many old, unprofitable coal mines. The National Union of Mine Workers, led by a man named Arthur Scargill, called a strike. The miners' strike lasted for a whole year. It was a bitter and sometimes violent struggle. It divided towns, villages, and even families. Police and striking miners often fought in the streets. Thatcher refused to back down. Her government had prepared for this fight. They had saved up large amounts of coal. After a year of great difficulty, the miners were defeated. They went back to work with nothing. It was a total victory for Thatcher. The power of the trade unions was broken, but for the mining communities, it was the end of their way of life. Many towns never recovered. Another key part of her plan was privatization. This meant selling big companies that the government owned. Before Thatcher, the government owned the phone company, the airline, the gas company, and the steel company. She sold them all. She wanted to create more competition and efficiency. She also wanted more people to own shares in companies. Millions of people bought shares for the first time. She also started a policy called right to buy. This allowed people living in government-owned houses to buy them at a low price. Millions of families became homeowners for the first time. In the world of finance, her government made big changes. These changes, called the Big Bang, made London one of the most important financial centers in the world. On the world stage, she was a very important figure. She became close friends with the U.S. President Ronald Reagan. They both shared a deep distrust of communism and the Soviet Union. They worked together to fight the Cold War, but she was also practical. When a new, modern leader named Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union, she met him. She famously said, "I like Mr. Gorbachev. We can do business together." She was one of the first Western leaders to see that change was coming. Her life was also in danger. In 1984, the terrorist group, the IRA, placed a bomb in her hotel during the Conservative Party conference. The bomb exploded in the middle of the night. It killed 5 people and destroyed parts of the hotel. Margaret Thatcher was not hurt. With amazing courage, she insisted the conference continue the next morning. She gave her speech as planned. It was a powerful message that she would not be defeated by terrorism. In 1987, she won a third election. It was a historic achievement, but her power was starting to cause problems. She became more and more unwilling to listen to other people's advice. She trusted only her own ideas. Two big issues would lead to her downfall. The first was Europe. Thatcher was always careful about Britain's relationship with other European countries. She was afraid of creating a European superstate that would control Britain. Her strong words against Europe worried many people in her party. The second and final problem was a new tax. It was officially called the community charge, but everyone called it the poll tax. Before, local taxes were based on the value of a person's house. The poll tax was different. Every adult had to pay the same amount. A rich duke paid the same as a poor cleaner. People thought this was deeply unfair. There were huge protests across the country. One protest in London turned into a violent riot. Thatcher refused to change the policy. This made many people believe she was no longer listening to the country. Her own party had had enough. In November 1990, one of her most senior and loyal government ministers, Geoffrey Howe, resigned. He gave a powerful speech in Parliament. He said working for her was like playing cricket, but your own captain breaks your bat. It was a signal for others to act. Another politician, Michael Heseltine, challenged her for the leadership of the party. In the first vote, Thatcher won, but not by enough. She needed to win a second vote. That night, she asked her most important ministers for their support. One by one, they told her she would probably lose. The Iron Lady had lost the support of her own team. The next morning, she announced she would resign. A few days later, she left 10 Downing Street for the last time. As her car drove away, she was seen crying. It was a shocking and sudden end to her powerful time as leader. After leaving power, Margaret Thatcher remained a famous figure. She wrote books and gave speeches around the world. She often criticized the new Prime Minister, John Major, especially about Europe. In her final years, her health became poor. She suffered from dementia, a sad illness that slowly took away her powerful mind. Her husband, Dennis, her greatest support, died in 2003. It was a loss she felt very deeply. Margaret Thatcher died on April 8, 2013, at the age of 87. Her funeral was a grand event. The Queen attended, along with leaders from all over the world. But even in death, she divided the nation. While some mourned a great leader, others held parties in the streets to celebrate. It showed how deep the feelings about her still were. Her legacy is complicated. She changed Britain's economy forever. She moved it away from old industries like coal mining and towards finance and services. The country became more modern and entrepreneurial, but it also became more unequal. The gap between the rich and the poor grew much wider. The old industrial areas in the north of England, Scotland, and Wales lost their jobs and suffered for many years. Margaret Thatcher was a leader with powerful beliefs. She was not afraid to make difficult and often unpopular decisions. She was intelligent, she worked incredibly hard, and she was completely fearless. Her greatest strength was her determination, but it was also her greatest weakness. Her certainty in her own ideas meant she rarely listened to others. She saw the world in black and white, with no space for compromise. Was she a hero who saved Britain, or did her ideas create a country with new, deep problems? This is the question people still ask today.